Sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you the most can be the ones who hurt you the worst. Elizabeth stared down at the fancy invitation she had received a week ago. The paper was thick and expensive, and her sister Melanie's handwriting was neat and perfect, like it always had been. Every letter was flawless, just like everything else in Melanie's life. Or at least, that's how it seemed. Elizabeth stood in front of the restaurant's shiny glass doors, wearing a soft gray silk dress. She checked her reflection. Her makeup was simple but elegant. Around her neck, she wore a small pearl necklace that sparkled gently under the light. It wasn't just jewelry, it was a gift she had bought for herself when she opened her first restaurant 10 years ago, a reminder of how far she had come. The restaurant, called Lame Songe, was on the top floor of the Four Seasons Hotel in Boston. From there, you could see all of Beacon Hill. The place was fancy, very fancy, a mix of old Boston charm and modern luxury. Elizabeth wasn't surprised this spot had been picked for the baby shower. She'd heard Melanie's husband, James, often brought his rich clients here. It was exactly the kind of place their family liked to show off in. "Do you have a reservation, ma'am?" the hostess at the door asked politely. Elizabeth held out her invitation. "I'm here for the Wilson Clark baby shower." The hostess gave her a quick look before checking the guest list. It was a look Elizabeth knew too well, the kind that asked, "Are you sure you're invited?" A decade ago, her family had spread a lie that she worked at a pub, and clearly, that rumor had stuck. No one had bothered to learn the truth. The room inside was filled with guests already. Women wearing designer dresses laughed and chatted, holding glasses of champagne. Tables covered in white cloth were decorated with soft blue flowers. It all looked like a page out of a magazine. In the center of it all stood Melanie, who was 7 months pregnant. She looked beautiful and glowing, her maternity dress tailored perfectly to her figure. A diamond necklace sparkled around her neck, probably a gift from James. Standing next to her was their mother, Carol, as put together as always, with her expensive clothes, perfect hair, and cold smile. Carol used to be a real estate agent, and she had worked hard to climb the social ladder. She cared more about appearances than anything else. She expected her daughters to marry well and live the kind of lives people envied. Melanie had done exactly that. But Elizabeth, in her mother's eyes, she had always fallen short. "Oh, Elizabeth, you came." Carol's voice was smooth, but underneath it was that familiar tone of disappointment. It was a sound Elizabeth had grown up with, always being reminded she wasn't enough. They only saw each other once or twice a year at family events, and that was fine with Elizabeth. Carol and Melanie lived in a rich suburb and spent time with other wealthy families. Elizabeth, on the other hand, lived quietly in the city, or at least, that's what they thought. What they didn't know was that Elizabeth owned and ran a famous restaurant called the Hidden Gem. It was tucked away in a beautiful old brick building in Beacon Hill. Her place had just 20 seats, and it was nearly impossible to get a reservation. Her guests included Harvard professors, famous writers, and old money families. Elizabeth didn't post on social media. She didn't brag. She just cooked, led her team, and let the food speak for itself. She was known only as Chef Liz, and to the world of fine dining, she was a rising star. But to her own family, she was still the sister who never lived up to expectations. Elizabeth looked around the room. There were name cards placed carefully on the tables. Each guest had their spot, but as she walked from table to table, her name was nowhere to be found. She heard whispers from across the room. A few of Melanie's old school friends glanced her way, then leaned in to whisper loudly, loud enough to be heard. "Is that her sister, the one who works at that pub?" Elizabeth didn't react. She just smiled softly and kept walking. 10 years had taught her patience, taught her grace. She knew who she was now, and nothing they said could shake that. Finally, Melanie walked over, her smile too sweet to be real. "Liz, you made it," she said, with fake warmth. "Having trouble finding your seat?" Before Elizabeth could answer, James joined them. He looked her up and down with a practiced smile, like he was trying to figure out what she was worth. "We had more people show up than expected," Melanie said, pretending to sound sorry. "We had to give seats to the important guests." Elizabeth understood right away. She wasn't one of them. "But hey," Melanie added with a little smirk, "maybe that pub across the street is more your kind of place." Laughter bubbled up around them. Their mother joined in, her smile cold as ever. "Yes, dear, that might be perfect for you." Elizabeth took a long, slow breath. 10 years of hard work, 10 years of silence, and nothing had changed with them. still the same cruelty hiding behind smiles. "I'll do just that," she said calmly, her smile mysterious. "Enjoy your party." She turned and walked out, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. She didn't look back. Out in the hallway, she paused by a window. The sun was starting to set, and the Boston skyline shimmered in gold. Somewhere among those rooftops stood her restaurant, her world, her truth. She pulled out her phone and opened a message. It was from the Michelin Guide. They were coming to her restaurant next week. A quiet smile touched her lips. James sat in the quiet room, staring at the magazine article again. "It says Chef Liz trained at a famous restaurant in France, and that was 10 years ago," he said slowly. "That's also when Elizabeth started pulling away from the family," Melanie whispered. She picked up her phone and opened the photos from her baby shower. She stopped at the last photo, the one of Elizabeth walking away. In that picture, Elizabeth's back wasn't slouched or sad. No, she looked calm, confident, like someone who knew exactly who she was. "Did we misunderstand her all this time?" Melanie's voice faded as her thoughts grew heavy. The next morning, Carol got up early and went back to the Hidden Gem. This time, she stood outside during the early kitchen prep hours. Delivery trucks came and went, unloading boxes of expensive vegetables, fresh seafood, and rare spices. Through the open back door, she saw her daughter. Elizabeth was dressed in a clean white chef's coat, her hair tied neatly back. She looked nothing like the pub worker Carol had imagined all these years. She was giving directions, checking ingredients, tasting sauces, and the kitchen staff moved around her with trust and respect. Every instruction she gave was followed with care, like she was the heart of the place. Carol's chest felt tight. This woman, the one she had always looked down on, was actually someone everyone here respected. And she had been that person for 10 years, right under their noses. 2 weeks after the baby shower, everything became clear to the whole city. The front page of Taste of Boston, a well-known food magazine, had a large photo of Elizabeth on the cover. She stood in her kitchen, looking serious but proud, wearing that same chef's coat. The title read, "The True Face of Chef Liz, the woman behind Boston's most secret culinary gem." Melanie found the magazine in a hospital waiting room. Her heart stopped when she saw the name. She picked it up and began to read. The article explained that Elizabeth had graduated from Boston University, then left to train at top restaurants in France, including one that held 3 Michelin stars. It went on to describe how she returned to Boston and opened the Hidden Gem with the support of a world-famous chef. Everything Elizabeth had done was carefully thought out, planned from the start. "She's amazing," Melanie whispered to herself. The article talked about her unique cooking style, how she blended traditional French techniques with fresh New England ingredients. One dish was called Landscape of Memories, and was praised as a work of art. Melanie forgot all about her prenatal appointment. She just kept reading. The Hidden Gem wasn't just popular, it was exclusive. There was always a 3-month wait. But even with money, people couldn't just walk in. Guests had to be recommended by someone who had already dined there. That rule wasn't about arrogance, it showed Elizabeth's deep love for her craft. She only wanted to serve people who truly appreciated the heart behind her food. The article ended with a quote. "In cuisine, what matters isn't the decoration, it's the essence, and I want to share that joy with those who understand it." Melanie froze. She realized, those words weren't just about food. They were about family, too. That evening, James was at a meeting at his investment bank. He was trying to focus when the chairman spoke up, smirking. "So, is it true? The owner-chef of the Hidden Gem is your sister-in-law?" James stiffened. "We've been trying for months to get a table. Can't you help us, since you're family?" James hesitated. He had told them years ago that his wife's sister worked at a pub. Now, how could he explain this? I'm not very familiar with her situation," he said weakly. The room fell silent. Some of the other executives exchanged glances. The truth was, getting into the Hidden Gem had become a mark of true status, and James had claimed he barely knew the chef. That night, Carol and Melanie stood across the street from the Hidden Gem. Through the warm, glowing windows, they saw guests dressed in quiet elegance enjoying Elizabeth's cooking. The restaurant was full. Melanie's voice shook. "Mom, what have we done?" They had mocked her, told her to go to a pub, laughed behind her back. And yet, here she was, already far above them in the world they had always wanted to belong to. The next morning, Carol gathered her courage and called the restaurant. I'm Elizabeth Wilson's mother, she said. Please hold while I check with the chef, the staff replied politely. A long pause. Then came the response. The chef has requested that all reservations go through the regular process. A letter of recommendation is required. Carol hung up slowly. Her hands were shaking. 10 years of pride, snobbishness, and cold treatment had led to this moment. A daughter who no longer recognized them as family. Days passed. Melanie started visiting the restaurant almost every day. She stood outside and watched, as customers came and went, smiling and satisfied. One afternoon, she stepped inside. The place was elegant and peaceful. I'd like to see my sister, please. The sous chef approached with a kind but firm tone. I'm sorry, we're fully booked. Also, we require a letter of recommendation from a current guest. Just then, Elizabeth came out of the kitchen. Their eyes met. Melanie saw her sister clearly, for the first time in years. Elizabeth looked calm, steady, a woman who had found her worth. Do you have a letter of recommendation, ma'am? She asked. Melanie felt her knees weaken. She turned and left the restaurant, tears falling down her cheeks. A few days later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Elizabeth. The handwriting was beautiful. Inside were only a few words. True value isn't in decoration, it's in essence. If you're ready to understand that, I'm here. 1 month later, Melanie gave birth to a baby girl. A bouquet arrived at the hospital. It was simple, wildflowers and gentle colors. The card just said, "Congratulations." It wasn't flashy, but it was warm. And Melanie knew, it was from her sister. Time passed. Then, another letter arrived. This one had a challenge inside. If you truly want to understand, come work at the restaurant. Start from the beginning. Only by doing so can you learn what matters most. Carol and Melanie were stunned. Their pride screamed at them to say no. But their hearts knew the truth. 3 months after the baby was born, Melanie stood in the Hidden Gems kitchen in a simple apron. She wasn't there as a guest, but as a dishwasher. Carol started working part-time on weekends, clearing plates and setting tables. The first few weeks were difficult. Their hands hurt, their backs ached, no one gave them special treatment. But slowly, something began to change. Melanie started noticing the care in every dish. Carol began to feel joy when customers smiled. 6 months later, Elizabeth prepared a simple meal for the staff. Melanie took one bite and started crying. "This is beautiful," she whispered. 10 years of unspoken feelings were in that food. A full year passed. Carol became part of the official dining room staff. Melanie was now an apprentice cook. The glitter of the old social world no longer mattered. They were learning to see things differently. Elizabeth called them both over one quiet night. "Starting tomorrow," she said gently, "let's meet as family." Tears fell down Carol's and Melanie's faces. They knew this wasn't just forgiveness, it was a new beginning. On a special Sunday morning, the Hidden Gem opened just for them. Elizabeth served them a quiet brunch. No fancy decorations, just love in every bite. "This," she said, placing the final dish on the table, "is my heart. I'm proud of you both, for learning to see what truly matters." Outside, the morning sun lit up Boston's red brick streets. Inside, a new story was beginning, one built on love, respect, and understanding. A family, reunited by the simple, powerful truth of real value.